If you are dating, married to, or related to a man-child, there is a good chance you have already tried everything. You have explained calmly. You have explained with tears. You have given ultimatums you did not even mean, and somehow, nothing changes. Here is the truth almost nobody tells you in these videos. The problem was never that you were not clear enough. The problem is that you have been using the wrong tools on the wrong kind of pattern. And, by the end of this video, you will understand exactly why those tools failed, how to correctly identify what you are actually dealing with, and the specific psychological approach that finally creates real change, not temporary guilt-driven promises that dissolve in a week. Think of me as your psychologist for the next few minutes. Let's diagnose this properly, the way a clinician would, instead of the way social media usually does. The first step in helping anyone is accurate identification, because treating the wrong problem never works. So let's go through the real signs, clinically, one at a time. Sign 1. Selective competence. This is when someone manages enormously complex responsibilities in one area of life, a demanding job, a business, a sport, but seems strangely paralyzed by simple emotional tasks, like a 5-minute conversation about feelings. If you have ever thought, he is clearly capable, so why can't he do this? That gap itself is diagnostic. It tells us the issue is not ability. It is avoidance of a specific category of discomfort. Sign 2. Humor as a shield. Watch what happens the instant a conversation turns emotionally serious. If the immediate response is a joke, a deflection, or suddenly needing to check the phone, that is not personality. That is a nervous system escaping a room it never learned to stand in. Sign 3. Outsourced memory. Appointments, emotional check-ins, or promises relevant to you consistently slip through the cracks, while things that matter only to him are remembered in perfect detail. This is not forgetfulness. It is an unconscious hierarchy of priorities. Sign 4. The disappearing apology. A real apology contains 3 parts: acknowledgement of what happened, ownership without excuses, and a specific plan to do differently. If what you are getting instead is silence, defensiveness, or a debate about whether you are even allowed to feel hurt, that is not an apology. It is a deflection wearing an apology's clothing. Sign 5. This is the one partners miss most often, is comfort with someone else absorbing the consequences. If bills get paid late because you quietly covered them, if conflicts get smoothed over because you apologized on his behalf, if plans get made because you are the one who always initiates, you are not in a partnership. You are functioning as an unpaid emotional manager. Here is a genuinely important clinical distinction before we go further. None of these signs, occurring once, mean anything. Everyone forgets an appointment sometimes. Everyone deflects occasionally when they are tired. What matters diagnostically is the pattern, repeating specifically around emotional stakes over months or years, despite you clearly naming it. There is a quick self-check I give people in this exact situation. Ask yourself honestly, over the last year, who initiated the last 5 hard conversations in the relationship? Who remembered the last 5 important dates? Who apologized first the last 5 times something went wrong? If the answer to almost all of those is consistently you, that is not a coincidence. That is data. It tells you the emotional labor in this relationship is not being shared. It is being assigned, quietly, without either of you ever explicitly agreeing to it. Now here's where most videos on this topic stop, and where I think the real value begins, because identifying the problem is only half the job. The other half is knowing exactly what to do about it, and just as importantly, what not to do. Let's start with what does not work, because you have probably already tried these, and understanding why they failed will save you enormous energy going forward. The first thing that does not work is lecturing. When you explain, in detail, calmly, for the 15th time, why something hurt you, it feels productive because you are being clear. But clinically, lecturing activates something called defensive listening. The brain of the person receiving it stops processing the content and starts preparing a rebuttal. More words simply meet more resistance. The second thing that does not work is doing it for him anyway, while venting about doing it. This is incredibly common and completely understandable, because in the moment it is faster to just handle it yourself. But every time you rescue someone from a responsibility while resenting it internally, you reinforce the exact childhood pattern that created this behavior in the first place. Someone else absorbs the discomfort, so there is never any incentive for his nervous system to build the skill. The third thing that does not work is the ultimatum used as a threat rather than a boundary. Change or I'm leaving, said in anger, in the middle of a fight rarely produces lasting change. It produces short-term compliance driven by fear, which fades the moment the fear does. Real behavioral change requires something steadier than a threat. It requires a structure. So what actually works? Let's go through the clinical approach, step by step. The first step is naming the pattern without shame, and doing it outside of conflict, not during it. Timing matters enormously here. A conversation started the moment after an argument is received as an attack. The same conversation, started on a calm Sunday afternoon, is received as information. Say something like, "I've noticed that emotional conversations seem to get avoided a lot, and I want to understand that pattern with you, not against you." This framing matters because it treats the behavior as a solvable pattern instead of a character flaw, and people are far more willing to work on a pattern than defend against an accusation. The second step is what I call natural consequence exposure. This means, very specifically, stepping back and allowing reality to teach the lesson instead of rescuing someone from it. If a bill is forgotten, you do not silently pay it and stay quiet about your resentment. You also do not scream about it. You simply let the natural consequence, a late fee, an uncomfortable phone call, occur, while remaining warm and present. This is uncomfortable for everyone involved, but discomfort tolerance is exactly the muscle that never got built, and it can only be built through repeated, survivable doses of exactly that discomfort. The third step is offering scaffolding, not rescue. There is a real difference between doing something for someone and doing something with someone. If a hard conversation needs to happen with a family member, rescuing looks like having that conversation for him. Scaffolding looks like saying, "I'll sit next to you while you make that call," but you're making it. This keeps the responsibility exactly where it belongs, while still providing support, which is very different from support that quietly absorbs the responsibility itself. The fourth step is reinforcing small wins immediately and specifically. When someone the do initiates a hard conversation or manages a responsibility without being asked, notice out loud, immediately. Not with exaggerated praise, which can feel condescending, but with simple acknowledgement. "I noticed you brought that up yourself. That mattered to me." Behavioral psychology is very clear on this point. Behavior that gets acknowledged gets repeated. Behavior that goes unnoticed, even when it is positive, tends to fade. The fifth step, and this is the one people resist the most, is protecting your own boundary regardless of his progress. This means deciding, clearly, in advance, what you personally need in order to stay in this relationship, and what happens if that need continues to go unmet. This is not a threat. It is information. And it needs to be decided while you are calm, not in the middle of an argument, because boundaries created in anger usually collapse under guilt later. A useful way to phrase this, clinically, sounds less like a warning and more like a simple statement of fact. Something along the lines of, "I need us to share responsibility for hard conversations, and if that continues to only fall on me for the next 6 months, I will need to reconsider what this relationship can look like." Notice, this is not cruel. It does not attack his character. It simply states your own need and your own honest limit, clearly, so there is no ambiguity later about what you actually meant. Here is something important I want to say directly, almost like a professional opinion rather than just information. Your job is never to fix another adult. You can create the conditions where growth becomes more likely. Clear naming, natural consequences, scaffolding instead of rescuing, acknowledgement of progress, and firm boundaries. But whether someone actually walks through that door is ultimately their decision, not yours. I say this because so many partners quietly believe that if they just find the right words or try hard enough, they can single-handedly produce change in someone else's nervous system. That belief, however loving, usually leads to exhaustion, not resolution. There is also a piece of good news worth genuinely sitting with. The brain remains capable of building new patterns at any age, through something called neuroplasticity. The emotional rooms that were locked in childhood are not permanently sealed. They can be reopened, but it usually requires exactly what we outlined: repeated, survivable exposure to the very discomfort that was avoided for years, alongside support that does not quietly replace the effort required. One more clarification before we close, because this matters. Everything discussed today applies just as easily in reverse. This pattern is not exclusively male, and it is not a moral failing when it shows up. It is a nervous system that adapted to whatever environment created it. Understanding that removes blame from the equation and replaces it with something far more useful, which is a clear, workable plan. So here is what we have covered today. A man-child pattern is identified through selective competence, humor used as an emotional shield, outsourced memory around what matters to you, disappearing apologies, and comfort with someone else absorbing life's consequences. What does not work is lecturing, quiet, resentment-fueled rescuing, and threats delivered in anger. What does work is naming the pattern calmly, allowing natural consequences instead of rescuing, offering scaffolding rather than doing it for him, reinforcing small wins immediately, and protecting your own boundary regardless of the outcome. If you take one thing from this video, let it be this. You are not responsible for building another adult's emotional muscles. You are only responsible for deciding, clearly and calmly, what kind of relationship you are willing to keep showing up for while those muscles are, or are not, being built. If this gave you real clarity today, consider subscribing Momentum Psyche, because we will keep exploring exactly this kind of practical, psychology-based guidance, the kind meant to actually change something in your life, not just describe it.